Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm really happy to be here with you, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. If you're new to the podcast and YouTube channel, you're about to find out very soon that we talk about some really important stuff here. We talk about, mindfulness practices and how the mindfulness practices can help us to live a life that allows us to really show up. Right, allows us to be who we are in all situations, right, and to accept not only who we are, but accept what is happening around us at the same time, accept the situations we find ourselves in, and accept the flow of life, and allows us to again show up and be part of that flow rather than trying to fight our way into the thing that exists in our expectations and our expectations that are based on past traumas and past issues that we've had and all this kind of stuff. So I hope you're comfortable. I hope you're going to enjoy this podcast. Every day I record an episode between Wednesday and Sunday, and I post it here on YouTube. It's also posted on the podcast platforms, just about every single one of them. And I also send out a daily email with the link to this podcast. And so, I welcome you if you are new. And for all of you who have been my supporters for so long, I want to thank you once again from the bottom of my heart. It means so much to me that I see, when I get comments from people, I get emails from you. I get financial support through my Patreon. If you are interested in the Patreon, I will put a link down below. Even $1 a month can make such a difference. So I'll put the link there so you can join Patreon and support me in this work if you choose to. But it's not necessary. Would help, but it's not necessary. And but I just want you to know that I really do appreciate it. I don't consider this my podcast. I consider this our podcast, right? Because without you, the listener and the watcher of the YouTube channel, I don't mean to make it just a podcast channel. It's also the YouTube channel. But without you, the person consuming the content, then me, the creator of the content, it doesn't matter, right? So it requires both of us, right? And that's true in almost every circumstance in life, right? It's not just us; it's us along with everyone else that's doing things, that's interacting with us, right? So thank you all, new and old. Thank you all for being here. So today I wanted to talk about a really very kind of important, they're all important topics. That's why I talk about them. But this is specifically, it's a tricky kind of topic, and so I want to bring light to it, and I want to try to, again, just sort of bring awareness to an issue here, okay, that many of us go through. I don't know if it's most of us, but many of us go through. And I know it's something I've gone through my whole life. And I do believe that it's tied into the trauma response. So before I bury the lead any further here, let me just tell you what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about the need that we have to be right. Okay. Now, of course, I shouldn't say, I'm kind of tongue in cheek when I say the need to be right, because we all want to be right? Because if we're wrong, we want to learn why we're wrong so we can correct ourselves and then come to be right? So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be correct, right? Because that's the same thing as saying that I want to understand, right? So that's not really what we're talking about here, but what we're talking about is the driving desire, and really, we could even call it something bigger than desire, right? It's this almost just a a really powerful drive. I can't even come up with the word for it, to tell people that we're right. Right? Or better yet, to correct people when we see that somebody else is wrong, right? Now, of course, in some circumstances, this is going to be helpful. And in some circumstances, it could be life-saving, right? Like, hey, no, I know that's poison in that glass. Don't drink it, right? Like that's, that there could be true life implications to this, right? Certainly as parents, right, we're always trying to guide our children. We're always trying to help them to learn themselves, to become, to be right on their own, right? But to teach them how to do that, right? And just in general, like it's something that we feel like it can. Well, let me say it this way: instead of something in general, we also feel that sometimes it can be an act of compassion to explain something to someone, right? Like, hey, I'm trying to help you out here. You're about to embarrass yourself by repeating something that's not true. Let me help you understand this thing, right? Like there is that too, and it is possible that it comes from a place of compassion, right? And that's the key, right? That is the key right there. Do we know where this is coming from in any given circumstance, right? In any given, instance that we find ourselves needing to explain something to someone, right? We hear somebody say something, no, that's wrong. Let me explain it to you. As a man, I could be called mansplaining, like that. That's what we would call it, right? And it happens. It really does. I'm not immune to it, right? I see a woman talking about a car, and it's like, no, I got to tell you what's the right thing, and so, but again, like if I'm explaining it just because I want this woman to know that I have the information, beat my chest and be the big man, and I want to, make myself known this way, well, quite frankly, that's not necessarily helpful. Right. And that's not really a reason to try to explain something to someone. Right. Like that is the thing that is not very helpful. And now the thing I want to go back to, as I was burying my lead a few minutes ago, right? Where does this desire come from? That is the question. Right? Again, is it coming from a place of compassion? Is it coming from a place of constructive, wanting to help someone, wanting to really, provide a benefit to somebody? And where does that come from, right? Are you only doing that because you want them to, to praise you? Because you want to have that like sort of, dopamine, serotonin, endorphin thing happening in your mind, in your brain, in your body that says, oh, I feel good now because I did something righteous, right? Are you the male savior? Are you the white savior? Are you the savior of any kind? Because not everybody wants to be saved. And whether somebody needs to be saved or not is not for you to determine. Right. And so the question becomes again, what is the driving motivation behind this desire that I have to explain things, to prove that I'm right? Right. Because if it is coming from a place where, no, I see this person is about to embarrass themselves and I want to save them from that eventuality, well, then that's a wholesome and beautiful, compassionate thing that you're doing. So keep doing that, right? Nothing wrong with that. And sure, if it's with your children, you have a certain responsibility to guide them in the right way, right? If your child is assuming something to be incorrect, well, then that could have significant implications later on in their life. So it is important for you to to help them to understand things properly, right? Nothing wrong with that. Now, how we say both of these things is a different question, right? And we can talk about this for just a second, I suppose, for all you parents out there, right? It's very important that while you're explaining to your child how to do something correctly or explain, correcting them on any level, right? It's important that you don't let them feel ashamed at their lack of knowledge, right? And it's important in that sense, it's important for you to remember that you are 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, right? And you have this wealth of decades of experience that your child doesn't have, right? And so even if it's you saying that to your child, like, hey, the only reason I know this any better than you is because I've been alive longer than you, that's all. Like that's the way it has to be presented, right? Just a little parenting tip, right? Otherwise, the child becomes discouraged, right? The child, and this is what happened to me I'm telling you this for a reason, right? And this is going to get back into our topic in a second. I promise I'm segueing all over the place here today. My segue game is strong today. But when we make the child believe that they are not smart, when we make them to believe that they are not, good enough, that they're not, that they are flawed somehow, that's what they're going to carry with them. And that ultimately becomes their self-talk. Right. And so you're going to decrease their self-esteem. You're going to take away their self-compassion, and you're going to create many more problems than you're fixing with this this correction that you're doing. Okay, so that's something for parents to be very, very careful about. I can coach you on this. I have coached parents before. If you're interested in that, get in touch. There's a link in the description. Okay, and we can do a free call. You don't have to pay for the first discussion, and I'll already be able to help you solve this even in one discussion. I promise you that. So let's segue back, right? So, right. So the idea then is that, we don't have to, it is not required of us to correct someone. Okay. That's the takeaway here, or that's one of the takeaways here. I don't even remember the segue that we were talking about a second ago, but it'll come back to me, I promise. But the real gist, the real important message here, right, is the fact that, as we're going through our life, right, again, like I said before, I think this is the segue, not everybody wants to be saved. And it's not your place to determine whether somebody needs to be saved, okay? So when somebody is, doing something that is in your mind, even if you are 100% sure, like beyond any doubt, you're sure that this person is incorrect in what they're saying, right? Like, no, it's, it's a 3-liter engine or something silly like that. I don't even know if there are 3-liter engines in cars. But the point is, like, even though you see them doing something, saying something, announcing something that's wrong, even arguing something that's wrong, it does not mean that you have to correct them. I just remember the segue. And this is important. I'm glad I remembered it. It's very, very important, right, to come back to this because, as I said a moment ago, as parents, right, when we're correcting our children over and over and over again, yes, we have the purest of intentions most of the time, right? We feel like it's our responsibility to help this child to become an adult and to do so in a way that's going to they're going to be able to handle life, right? Like, that's my responsibility. I'm teaching you how to handle life, and that's a very important job, right? But if I make you feel like you're not smart, if I make you feel like you are somehow flawed, well, then that's going to be a trauma for you. Okay? And if it happens over and over and over again, as it did for me when I was a child, I couldn't get out of my way. I literally couldn't do anything without being told how, I could be doing it better, or I should be doing it differently, or I have the wrong idea, this, that, right? It was every single day, it seemed like. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't quite that. I'm sure it wasn't quite every single day, but looking back on it, that's how it feels. And that is a sign of how traumatic it was. Right? Because I felt like there was nothing that I could do that my parents weren't correcting me for. Okay, this was very damaging to me. Now, the reason this is important, the reason why we segued back into this, is because the need that you feel to correct people, the need that you feel to be right and to make sure that everybody knows you're right, that could very well possibly be part of your trauma response. Let me repeat that. The need to explain things, the need to win arguments, the need to show people that you are right could very possibly be rooted in your trauma response. Which means, as I said before, when we're going through, when we're in this place of having to, feeling ourselves having to explain things and guide things and correct things and stuff like that, right? It's important, as I said before, to understand why we're doing that, what's motivating us to do that. And if it's just because, if the answer to that question is, I don't know what's motivating me to do this, but I can't help it, I just can't stop myself, well, then that is a very clear indication that this is an implicit memory in your body, right? And that's why you don't understand. I don't know why I do this, right? Anytime we say that, I don't know why I do this all the time, right? It doesn't mean that there's no reason why you do it all the time. What it means is that you just don't have conscious awareness of why you do this all the time, right? And when we go through trauma, especially as children, what trauma, the way that our body remembers trauma, and this is talked about by Peter Levine, by Bessel van der Kolk, by Gabor Mate, all the experts, even Thomas Hubel, I think, talks about this a little bit. All the experts on trauma, right, all say this on some level, right, that when we experience trauma as a child, what it does is it becomes an implicit memory. Okay, now implicit memory is something that, again, implicit implies that it's not explicit. It's not in your conscious awareness. It's something that's happening in the background. It's something that's baked into who you are. And so that, and again, any time that you're having a reaction and you cannot figure out why you're having that reaction, I bet 10 to 1 that it's because it's part of your trauma response. Right? And so this reaction has been something that's just been baked into your body, as I say, right? So then when you see a chance to say, no, I am right here, that is your little traumatic child inside of you screaming out to say, I don't want to be traumatized anymore. Now, again, I'm not diagnosing anybody. Okay, now it's very possible that that's not the case, right? It's very possible that it's just something else. Maybe it's just, maybe it's an inherited quality from your parents, right? But without the abuse, right? That's very possible, okay? Very possible that this does not come from a trauma response, but I'm just pointing out that it is a known potential correlation. Let's just put it that way, okay? This comes, again, from trauma experts, not from just me, okay? So now that's the point of the mindfulness practices, and especially the compassion practices, right? And again, for all of you who have joined us recently, and this is one of the early episodes that you're listening to or watching here, the combination of mindfulness and compassion is a practice that's referred to as heartfulness. Okay, not mindfulness, but heartfulness, right? And so when we practice heartfulness, right, which heartfulness includes everything that's included in mindfulness, right, which is just simply paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally, as our friend John Kabat-Zinn says, as our friend Jack Kornfield says, and his wife Trudy, they call it loving awareness. Right? There are some people who call it moment-to-moment awareness. There are some people who call it there's a bunch of different kind of terms, but the idea is that it's just very simply just paying attention to what's happening and doing so with an openness and with an absence of judgment, right? So not saying that this is a good thing or this is a bad thing. It's just part of life. It's just one of the ingredients in my experience, in my moment-to-moment experience, and that's all it is. It might be pleasurable, it might be painful, or it might be completely neutral. And whatever it is exactly what it is. And so therefore, I just need to accept it in this present moment, just that this is what's arising. And so when we can combine that practice with a purposeful, because automatically you get a kindness out of this. You do, because you can't be this open and this accepting without feeling an innate sense of kindness coming out. You just can't do it. I promise you that. But we can intentionally cultivate compassion and kindness along with this. That's where we come to heartfulness. Now, what these practices do, right? Self-awareness. The practices enable you to build a skill that allows you to see this motivation that you have, right? That allows you to see, like, okay, yeah, I'm just explaining this to this person just really for my own benefit, and that's wrong. Like, that's not. I don't need to benefit here. Instead, I can ask the person, hey, I think you might be mistaken. Would you like me to explain what I think is true? Because maybe not, right? So that's, the self-awareness to be able to just know when we're doing it, right? And then I'll skip ahead because I'm going to segue into something else, but I'll skip ahead over another really important part of mindfulness and into the heartfulness part, which is the compassion, right? Which is the understanding that, what is this gonna do? Like, what, if I explain this to this person, are they going to be appreciative of it and benefit from it, or are they going to feel like insulted and put down by it? Because if it's the latter, I keep my mouth shut. I don't have to say anything. Segueing us back to my other point, that the other thing that the mindfulness practice helps us to do is to understand that I can just let it go. I can just accept that this person is wrong about something and that I do not have to correct them. I can just let it go. Now, again, there are times, and certainly it depends on your role in this other person's life, right? If you're this person's manager, or if you're this person's employer, or you're this person's parent, or you're this person's teacher, right? Well, then it's your job. It's your responsibility to do a certain amount of that guidance. But that, again, should always include kindness and compassion, because you don't want to make somebody feel like they're stupid, because they're not. They're just not as informed about this thing as you are. That's all, right? Just because somebody doesn't know how many liters are in a car engine doesn't mean that they're stupid, right? There's a quote that's attributed to Einstein, and it's one of those that I'm not sure it's actually his quote, but it's something, something about if we try to teach a fish how to climb a tree, the fish will think it's stupid for the rest of its life, right? So it's important to be compassionate, even when we feel that we do have a legitimate obligation to correct somebody. But if we don't have a legitimate obligation to correct somebody, then the next thing we should be considering is, can I just let this go? Can I just let it be? Can I just allow the situation to continue to arise without my input or interference or influence? And now that brings us to an equally, if not more, valuable skill, because that's what these are. These are skills, right? It is a skill to be able to recognize when I'm about to mansplain to somebody, and it's a skill to get me to stop mansplaining against somebody, right? But there's another skill that comes out of this. Right. Now, I mean, there's many, many skills that come out of this work, as you hear me talk about all the time. I mean, it's nothing but skills, right? But there's another skill that applies to this, that's sort of an evolution of this idea, right? Once we start getting into the idea, or getting into the practice rather, of not correcting people all the time, and truly intentionally just allowing myself, like I could even do this, like going into a party, right? I could say, you know what, I'm going to set the intention to just not correct anybody today. No matter what happens in this party, I'm not going to correct anybody. I'm just going to let it go, right? That's a great way to practice this kind of thing. You could do that in your family too, right? Yeah. And this is probably something I should do, quite frankly. If you're watching me, babe, yeah, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to just try to say, no matter what, I'm not going to correct my wife. No matter what she says, I'm just going to let it go and see what happens. Take it like a little experiment, right? Be curious about it. Be open about it. And see what happens if you just decide not to correct people. Now, again, as we develop and some of these skills are going to come, all of these skills are going to come to you just by practicing mindfulness every day, right? So this is just a way to sort of, zero in on this area of your life, right? This the little practice that I just told you, and it's a great practice, right? And if it's too much to say I'm never going to do it, which it might be too much to do that, right? Like that's a lot to ask for yourself, right? So what you can do instead is set a timer, right? And set it for like 15 minutes, right? And say, for this 15 minutes, no matter what anybody says, whether I'm at work, I'm at home, I'm at a party, I'm at a bank, whatever, for this 15 minutes, Whatever anybody says, I am not going to correct them. In fact, the only information I'm going to offer up is when I'm asked a question. Otherwise, I'm just going to be present with what's happening. Try it. I'm telling you, try it. Now, again, there's another evolved thing that's beyond this, right? If we keep going down this path, we get to something that might be even more important, right? In fact, I think it is, because it's so universal and it's so big and powerful. And let me not rebury the lead here, right? What comes to our understanding as we cultivate this ability to not explain things, the ability to just let people just do whatever they're doing, like it's okay, right? Like, because most of the time the stakes are not that high, right? If this person doesn't really understand the way the car works, like, does that really matter to their lives? Does it? And that's the kind of thing where, like a few days later, you might go up to the person and say, we were talking the other day and you said this thing about your, your car. And I just want to let you know that I think you might be mistaken about the way it works. And you might want to know this just because if you go to a mechanic, you want them to think that what you're doing, right? So there can be a constructive way to do it, right? It's not a zero sum. It's not never do that, right? But it's do it in a way that makes sense, right? And so once we start to cultivate that, now we get to this really, really important truth. And the understanding and what becomes an inherent skill around this truth is that we don't have control, right? Or more specifically, we can only control ourselves, right? We cannot control circumstances. We cannot control what other people do, what other people say, what other people feel. We cannot control those things. And the sooner we realize that we cannot control those things, and the sooner we decide to stop trying to control those things, that is the moment we know peace. That is the moment that we come into our equanimity and we allow ourselves to just be. And my friends, this is a very exciting moment. And it's out there. It's waiting for you out there. Okay, so all you got to do is keep doing your mindfulness practices and you will meet that moment. There's nothing you need to strive to. There's nothing you need to reach for. There's nothing you need to panic about. Okay, just keep on going. But seriously, if this is something that's really alive for you and you feel like, oh, no, I need to fix this because it's damaging my life, like this is urgent, this is a very high priority, get in touch with me, okay? Because this is really not a hard thing to fix. It really isn't. And I can certainly help you, aside from the practice that I just gave you. But if that is a thing for you, start doing that today. I promise you it'll help. All right, everybody. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again for listening. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow for my Friday podcast, your Sunday, and then I'll be off for a couple of days. So I wish you well. Have a wonderful day, and I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care, everybody.